Welcome to How to Solve Linear Equations. Now that we have done the 6 fundamental problems, in this one we are going to write down a sort of recipe on how to solve all general linear equations. What us mathematicians are going to try to do is make our linear equations look nasty. So our first step for any problem that we see is to simplify as much as possible. Okay? That is going to make our solving the linear equations very nice. Go back to those nice 6 original problems we saw in the previous video. After we have simplified, our next step is to make sure there is only one variable. And sometimes they get tricky and they'll see the same variable on 2 different sides or maybe multiples of them, and we have to add them, combine them together. Basically simplify again, but this is more of a step where we get the variable on one side of the equation. It does not matter what side you pick. A lot of students like to choose the left-hand side, but I just usually keep my direction vague and say get variable on one side. Okay? You pick whichever side you like. The next step is called the addition property. The addition property is the fancy way we like to say what you do to one side, you do to the other. So let's see it written in fancy ways. If we have an equation that says A equals B, okay? Then, I wrote an arrow. This means then in mathematics, okay? If we manipulate one side by adding C, we must do the same thing to the other side by adding C again, okay? So what you do to one side, you do to the other. Now, I wrote plus C. It's the same thing if you add a negative number. That's subtraction. Okay, so adding and subtracting is taken care of next in our order of how to solve linear equations. The last step is the multiplication property. I'm not going to write out multiplication. Property. The multiplication property says almost exactly the same thing as the addition property. It says if you have an equation, let's say A equals B, then if you mess with one side, you do exactly the same thing to the other. So that means if you take A and you times it by C, you better do exactly the same thing to B, where you times it by C. Do note, there is one little warning here. C here cannot equal 0. There are a lot of good reasons out there why C can equal 0. I'm just going to tell you, for now, trust me, okay? C can't ever be 0. Don't you dare multiply by 0. Because when you multiply by 0, it's kind of like a black hole. It just sucks everything in and everything turns into 0. And it's very dangerous with equations because we could end up writing a false statement and we won't end up finding a solution. Okay? So never multiply by 0. You know you can't divide by 0. So keep that in mind. With these simple 4 directions that we got here, we are now going to tackle some of the nastiest problems I can dream up. So let's go ahead and start. Our first one, our directions will be the vague solve. This implies to us solve for the indicated variable. Usually x is what we're going to have. Our first one, let's kind of be nice, but not at the same time. We got 2x minus 3x plus 5 equals 6 minus 7. Okay, and that's a 7. I like to write it with a line there. So our first step when we are solving this linear equation, there's only one variable. It's x. Yeah, you see it in 2 spots. We are going to try to simplify. Okay? Now go very slow. I still like to circle my equal sign. That makes sure that I simplify the left-hand side as much as possible. Then I'll simplify the right-hand side as much as possible. And then I'll start messing with the equation. Keeps it nice and clean, okay? So looking at just this left-hand side, we are going to see if we can simplify it. Sure enough, we have 2x minus 3x. The easiest thing I can do to myself is think of money. I'm going to say that this x is a dollar sign. It's like a unit. So I have $2, and I go out and spend, take away $3, which is, not so great. I'm not good with money. 2 take away 3, 2 minus 3 is negative $1, right? Well, not dollar in this case, it's x. So I combine those like terms. Plus this 5, they can't combine, so that plus 5 is just coming along for the ride. And that's as good as that left-hand side will be. Sometimes we don't write the 1 here and we just write negative x. I'm going to let the 1 hang out until I get more comfortable with my problems, okay? Now on the right-hand side, I got 6 minus 7. Ooh, got a thing for negatives today, right? 6 take away 7 is negative 1. And now, this is slowly coming back to those nice fundamental problems we saw in the previous video. First things first, though, let's kind of sneak back and look at our rules here. Simplify. Okay, I just did that. Get variable on one side. All right, let me take a look. I only see one variable on one side, so step 2 is already done for me. Woo, that's good. All right, sneak back to your directions. I'm going to flip back. I got addition property. So sometimes students get carried away with thinking about PEMDAS or order of operations. When we are solving equations, we kind of work backwards through order of operations. So we want to undo addition and subtraction first, then head into multiplication. Does it matter? No, you can do it in any order you want because it's an equation, as long as whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Is it easier? No, it's usually easier to do addition and subtraction first, then multiplication and division. So for the sake of easiness, I'm going to go to step 3, and I see there's a plus 5 here. Don't want it. I want to undo that plus 5, just like our first problem that we saw in the previous video, and I'm going to subtract 5. An addition property says what I do to one side, I have to do exactly the same thing to the other side. Now, I still have this negative 1x. Nothing's gone there, right? Plus 5 minus 5 cancels out, left with nothing. Negative 1 minus 5, when the signs are the same, it's just like adding. So 1 plus 5 is 6, and it's still negative. Okay? I know I went a little fast there. You can think about it. You owe the bank $1. You go out and spend $5. You're still in debt $6. Okay? Now, I have not gotten x by itself. There is still this negative 1 times x in front of it. So I need to undo that. And multiplication property is up next. Whatever I do to one side of the equation, I must do exactly the same thing to the other side. So I'm going to undo it. Now there's 2 ways you can do this. I'm just going to hit the simplest way. I see that there's multiplication, so I'm going to undo it by dividing. If you're dreaming up other ways and you get the same answer, there is another way. I'll touch that later on. So I am dividing by negative 1. Keeping that sign because a negative divided by a negative is positive. And whatever I do to one side, I do exactly the same thing to the other. I'm left with x all by itself, yay. And negative 6 divided by negative 1, negative divided by negative is positive. 6 divided by 1 is still 6. And there's our solution. If you want, take it, plug it back into the original problem before you messed with it, and see if the statement is still true. You'll be pleasantly surprised that 6 does work. Okay, let's do another one. So now we are going to have x on 2 different sides of the equation, just to get it a little bit more tricky. But what I really need you to keep in mind is that all of these problems boil down to those nice fundamental ones we did in the beginning. Okay? So here we have 5x. You read it as 5 times x. That multiplication is implied. Minus 3 equals 7x plus 5. Again, what you're going to want to make sure you focus on is your equal sign. Okay, there it is. Those are our two sides. First step, simplify. Well, 5x minus 3, they can't combine. Mostly because 3 is not a like term. It does not have an x, can't combine with that guy. They're just two different species, okay? Now we got 7x plus 5 on the right-hand side. Same reasoning. They can't combine. So step 1 is done for us. And let's just write a little note to ourselves, right? We have simplify as our first step. We basically did that because there's nothing to simplify. Step 2, we are going to get the variable on one side. You'll notice there is an x on two sides of the equation. So that's what we're going to do. It does not matter which side you pick. Just in case you didn't hear me. It does not matter which side you pick of the equation. Just commit, okay? I personally like to follow the law, and gravity is a law. Smaller things gravitate towards larger things. So I usually pick whoever's smaller and move it to the bigger. That's my only logic, but again, it does not matter which one you pick. I am going to say, all right, 5x, I am going to move you to the other side. Now, whenever we move variables, it's addition and subtraction. We are never dividing. So let's go slow here, because this is probably where a lot of you are going to go, ooh, this was the breaking point, okay? So I look over here, I got a 5x on this left-hand side. If I want to move it, I got to undo. If there's no operation written here, it's assumed to be positive. So to undo it, I'm going to subtract 5x. What this does is 5x minus 5x cancels out, and the x is gone from this side of the equation. If you don't believe me, think about it as x being a unit. I have $5, and I go out and spend $5. I'm left with no dollars, okay? Now, whatever you do to one side, you got to do exactly the same thing to the other side. So, dollars are gone here. No 5x's. They're gone. Still got that -3, though. He's chilling there. Don't lose track of that sign. And now I have 7x minus 5x. Well, 7, take away 5. $7 minus $5 is 2. Still got that plus 5 just chilling at the end there. So, get the variable on one side. Check. After we've done that, we are going to get our x solved for by using addition property and then multiplication property. So here's our equal sign. X is hanging out over here. It's a little weird because all the previous problems has been on the left side. It's the same thing. Don't let it freak you out. Okay, you got 2x plus 5. I want to do that plus 5. Don't like it. Subtract 5. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And now we are left with -3 minus 5. Two negatives just becomes a smaller number, right? A larger negative. -8. And the plus 5 minus 5 cancels out. We're left with just 2x. And that's really 2 times x. So now it's multiplication property. So this step right here, if you're following along, wanting to write extra notes, that was addition property. And last but not least, we will be doing our multiplication property. Okay, so it's 2 times x. Don't like that. I'm going to undo it. Divide by 2. What I do to one side, I got to do to the other side. Negative divided by positive is negative. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times anything is still the same thing. And there's our solution. Okay, take a deep breath. We're going to do another one, and then we will call it quits for this video and do a separate video for those fractions that you're going to really enjoy. But for this next one, we're just going to try to make it as horrible as we possibly can. This is where us mathematicians get really mean, and we're going, let's make this nasty. We got -5, and then, oh my gosh, what is this thing? A parenthesis? X plus 2, close that parenthesis, equals 3. Now we got another parenthesis, X minus 6. Okay. Wow. If these parentheses are the first time you're seeing them, take a deep breath. They're not that bad. They are implying multiplication. Okay? That's what's going on between the number in front of these parentheses. So this is just multiplication. You might remember something called distributive law. And if you don't, I'm going to show you it right now. Distributive law says if you have something in front of parentheses with like B plus C inside it, that means you can distribute that thing in front to each term inside of the parentheses. It's a really handy rule, mostly used when the parentheses can't be simplified any further. So in this case, X plus 2 can't do anything with that. So you get to use the number in front and distribute it to simplify. So that's what we're going to do. This is step 1 of how to solve our linear equations. We are going to distribute that negative 5. Oh, I was really mean to you guys. There's a negative 5. And just to stress it, I usually circle or highlight what's in front. And then I like to draw an arrow to say, hey, he goes to the first term and he goes to the second term. So I have negative 5 times x. I don't know, negative 5 times x. That can't combine it. But negative 5 times 2, I do know what that is. Negative times a positive is a negative. 5 times 2 is 10. And I know you love that so much. It was so nice. Let's do it twice. We got a 3 times this nice stuff in parentheses. So we're going to go ahead and distribute it to each term. So we have 3 times x, 3x, and 3 times negative 6, which is negative 18. We can't simplify any further, so step 1 in our how-to is done. Step 2, we got x on 2 sides of this equation, right? There's an x hanging out here and an x hanging out here. Now, again, I like to move smaller guys to bigger guys. Generally, that's what I would do here. But because I really want you to believe me that it does not matter which one you move, I'm going to move the right one to the left side. Just for fun. It's a little bit painful for me because that's not what I'm used to. I like to move smaller to bigger. But we're going to do it just so that you trust me. Okay? So let's say for whatever reason I said, hey, 3x, I'm going to move you to the other side. If I want to move the 3x, I'm looking at the sign in front of it. It's positive, so to undo it, I subtract it. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, I do exactly the same thing to the other side. Now, 3x minus 3x, that cancels out. We're left with, oh, gross, negative 18. Don't lose track of your signs. And now we have negative 5x minus 3x. Oh, 2 negatives. We're just going more in debt. I'm bad with money, right? I owe the bank $5 and I go out and spend another $3. I have negative $8. That negative 10 is still hanging out there. And now we got the variable on one side. So we're done with step 2. Step 3, we are doing addition property. This x is here. I am messing with the side that has the variable. So right now there's that minus 10. Okay, not enjoying that very much. I got to undo that. So if it's minus 10, I'm going to add 10 because negative 10 plus 10 cancels out. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other side. Are you sick of me saying that yet? And let's keep going. So we got negative 8x equals, we add 10 over here. Watch out, the signs are different. If the signs are different, you're subtracting. Different signs is a difference. So really you do 18 minus 10 is 8. Keep the sign of the larger number, larger absolute value technically, and then we got that negative 8 there. Alrighty, gross. This was a really nasty problem I gave you guys. I hope you're hanging on. All right, let's keep going. We got negative 8x equals negative 8. You probably could guess what x is right now at this point, but sometimes you're so involved in the problem that you just keep going through the steps, and that's okay. No harm there. Take a moment, breathe, and see if you could guess the answer. Maybe pause it. And let's go ahead and just do it brute force. We have negative 8 times x, so I want to undo that. I'm going to divide by negative 8. What I do to one side, I do to the other side. Exactly the same thing. Negative 8 divided by negative 8 is 1. Oh, look, negative 8 divided by negative 8 is 1. So my solution is 1.